The first one of these we made, which was I don't know, about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer. We made for a photo shoot we were doing here for a little project we're working on. I made a drinks ladle for a cocktail that a chap called Nick Strangeway had created for the forge. And we didn't have any ladles, so quickly knocked up a little bit of copper and stainless. We use copper and stainless steel because they don't rust. They're good for the kitchen. If these were made of iron or steel, then there is much more potential for it to go rusty. I was originally trained as a jewellery maker, and I think the first metals I've really worked some 29 years ago, was copper. So a lot of jewellery making, it's done, like your test pieces would be done in copper, and then you'd move into using sterling silver or gold. The properties of copper and the properties of silver are very, very similar. So whatever's going to happen to a copper bowl, it'll happen to a silver bowl. So you kind of practice in one material before going on to another. For a blacksmith, the properties of copper are kind of quite exciting. You don't need to work it hot. It does become work hardened, so you've got to re-anneal it. So the process of working and annealing back and forth is very similar to working on a forge, but you're just not working the metal hot, you're working it cold. We've heated them up to like a cherry red colour, and then we've quenched them, and the quenching actually keeps them soft. Like we said, I mean, I've been planning to make ladles and spatulas, copper ladles and spatulas for 2, maybe 3 years. And we had a photographer was there and arrived. We had a chef and Nick. We've got Poots, a stylist. We've got everyone there. There's 5 or 6 people, and we didn't have the right products to photograph. I quite like that intensity. I mean, we had to work on the hop to a certain degree. I think I remember we didn't even have any copper discs. We had to grind or cut and grind a piece of copper sheet, quickly work out the tooling. I mean, that's interesting. So in the film, you'll see some quite rustic tooling. It's stuff that we've sort of welded together, stuff that we kind of made quickly to get this one product so we could photograph it. But actually, really enjoying the results from that. We've actually kept the same tooling. Because it gives a particular type of texture. As you start to heat the discs, you will see the changes in the colour. It's quite difficult to see with copper. You have to kind of take the flame away from the piece of metal so you can see the real colour, because it's quite shiny. It reflects a lot of the light back. So when you're annealing it, you're looking for a nice cherry red colour. And then when it's quenched, you get these beautiful kind of oranges and blacks and sometimes slight blue colours and deep reds, and it's just the oxidisation because it's been quenched really quickly, and you get this lovely, lovely patina. When we're raising the bowls for these ladles, we're actually doing it in a slightly unconventional fashion. So there is a very traditional way of raising dishes. You start with a flat sheet and you work it in a particular fashion, and it raises the edges, it raises the outside edges of the sheet of metal. But we're blacksmiths, so in our wisdom we've decided to do things slightly differently. So actually we sink the dishes into a metal former to start with. We heat them up and then we sink them into a bowl. They're then reheated and we sink them a couple of times just to get a rough sort of dome shape. Then they're actually placed over the top of a solid steel bowl that sits on the anvil. And we hammer almost in a spiral fashion out from the middle all the way to the edges. And that gives a beautiful texture both to the inside of the bowl, and also you get this kind of nice faceted texture on the outside. I mean, they're beautiful when they're oxidised, but they're quite dirty and they're slightly kind of misshapen, and then you see this beautiful transition to all the facets coming, and it slightly kind of raises the edge where you're where I'm planishing the outside. What I actually really love is the texture on the inside. So we could get these spun, we could press these out, and you can make dishes and bowls in many different ways, but actually it's quite a labour intensive technique that we've sort of, that we're making these with. But the final textures that you're getting are so beautiful. That we wouldn't want to lose that aspect of it. Our entire business is based around making kitchen utensils, cooking equipment, outdoor kind of barbecue equipment, pans, skillets, so everything is based around something that you can use for eating and drinking. And I think a set of serving utensils is a kind of an elevation from the more rustic iron cooking-ware that we normally make. I think our use of black stainless has become really interesting for us. So black stainless is effectively just stainless steel that's been forged. So when you heat steel up, it oxidizes, and that in itself is rust proof. But what you end up is with a stainless product that has that lovely rustic, black, grey, sort of pewter feel to it.
Black stainless isn't something that's been used traditionally by blacksmiths in the past, and we don't see it very often nowadays because stainless is a harder material to work, both physically in terms of the fact that it's harder to forge out, it is a harder material, but also it's technically more difficult. The process is the same as if I was forging the same item in mild steel. It's just you have to maintain a higher temperature, and you have to just be a lot more aware about what's happening in the steel. Stainless likes to twist if you're forging tapers, it likes to be a little bit finicky and make your life hard work, so you have to stay on top of it a lot more than you do with mild steel. And as it's a harder material, if something starts to go a bit peaked-on, then you have to catch it really quickly. The power hammer is a really nice tool to use for a couple of reasons. One of them is that you have a hammer that is going up and down in exactly the same place every time, with a bottom die that's in exactly the same place every time. So you can produce really neat shoulders very easily, which is really useful for isolating material for spreading out the rivet plate. It also creates, because it's at a constant speed, it creates a very nice texture because it's very predictable, and the surface that it's striking the steel with is very predictable. You can create this very nice even texture.
So 5 years ago, I made a sudden decision to just make kitchenware. I'd been making gates and railings and sculpture and lighting and a little bit of kind of cooking equipment, and decided just to specialise. I think I wanted to enjoy the process, the physical process of making each object. Wasn't enjoying the stuff that I was making, so came up with the idea of forged kitchenware. Started to develop a range, mostly outdoor cooking equipment to start with, a little bit of indoor stuff. And then through that, started to meet more and more chefs. When we were going to the festivals, there's the live fire stages, so which kind of gives some stuff to chefs so that they could use it. And just started to get more and more excited about utensils that you can cook with, pans that you can cook in. We make bottle openers, we make corkscrews, and I think it was a natural progression to move more away from the craft movement and more into the kind of food industry or into the food world, and that has just been a big change for us and the products that we make. Yeah, in a way it's easy to make a kind of a sample, and then you think, or you make a kind of an original piece, and then you think, well, how can we mechanize this? How can we mass produce this? How can we get it faster? But the original ladle is still hanging in the kitchen, and we do refer to that, so let's keep that style, that kind of inspiration, that sense of creativity. We're trying to keep that in the products all the way through, even if we have to just make 2, or we have to make 20, or we have to make 200. We still try and keep that sense of kind of uniqueness in each product.
In fact, that original one is still the one that we refer to if we're trying to make sure that the current products that we're producing are correct.
So the copper will oxidize over time. The original that we have hanging up in the kitchen has a beautiful patina on it. You know, you want to use a ladle. You've got to wash it up. You've got to dry it up. It won't go rusty, but it will oxidize. And for me personally, and I think for all of us, that is part of its kind of story. It's part of its journey. I know journey is a bit of a naff word, but it's part of its life. You know, and you can start to see the age in it. And over time, they'll have a beautiful patina will develop. The copper will darken up, and it'll get a few scuffs and a few marks and a few scratches. And I think for me, that only enhances its beauty as a product, as an item. They're complemented by being used, and they're complemented by the food that the chefs are serving up. They're complemented by the ingredients that the chefs are choosing. So in a sense, kind of utensils, they're not quite another ingredient, but they are definitely part of the whole process of making a meal. So you can have the best produce, but use the worst equipment. And to me, that's just a crying shame. I think that you want to be able to use the best equipment you can afford. And cooking doesn't start on the plate being served to you. It starts with the growers. It starts with the fishermen, with the farmers, and the people making the equipment that you use to cook with. I mean, people are especially with the kind of organic movement, with the buy local movement, with the sort of grow your own, with the general public becoming a lot more aware of where produce comes from. I think we sit in a kind of a similar world to a certain degree. So it's that people are starting to care about where their utensils come from, where their cooking pots come from, who's making them, what's the story behind them. They're kind of buying into individuals making stuff, whether it's metalwork or whether it's spoon carvers or glass blowers or ceramics. I think there's a big interest in the people who make these items, and it goes hand in hand with the farmers, with the food producers, with the chefs, and it becomes a much more complete story.
Food is something that is near and dear to all of us. It's something that we all get excited about, and so the group of us together produce kitchenware very well because it's something that we all have experience of. We all love food, and we all appreciate the craftsmanship behind the tools used to make it.
Yeah, I think the greatest compliment to us as craftsmen is seeing the products that we make being used. We make kitchenware, we make kitchen utensils, so seeing that being used by a chef to produce beautiful food, beautiful dishes, or if it's a knife being used to prepare food, a skillet to serve food, whatever, any of these things, that's the greatest compliment that we can get.